Welcome to Recover His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds, and today I'm here with Stuart Whiting. And Stuart, who normally kind of co-hosts this with me, and now today you're our guest.
I am the guest. I'm sitting in the right side. First time I've been in the guest seat.
There you go. There you go. And we've been talking about this series kind of born out of our thoughts about the fundraiser dinner we're having coming up in August about All Rise. And one of the things we're recognizing is that being a part of this recovery ministry isn't just about helping men and their families change and grow and rise up, but that as we serve them, as we work alongside them and that type of thing, that we find ourselves being changed and that we're impacted as well. You've joined us the last few years on this journey and helping our guys. And I think your story is an interesting one in terms of how it's impacted you and your family and that type of thing as well. And you chose, obviously, to leave a very good career to join us. And so I'd like to hear more about kind of what your journey's been. Maybe just kind of start from the beginning, kind of give us some background, and we can talk about how God's affected you through this.
Okay, yeah. I had a great childhood growing up, a great family, military brat. Dad was Air Force. It's one of those things, and reflecting on it, in the moment, you don't realize how good it is, how great it is. I mean, I always knew it was good, but looking on, back on it now, just how blessed I was, of loving family, a Christian family, great older brothers. They didn't pick on me too bad. They tended to fight among themselves, but loved school, loved learning, loved mathematics, and went to Auburn to study engineering because that's what seemed like a practical way to, use math. And met my wife there, part of a great ministry there, the Auburn Christian Student Center, and got a job here in Huntsville, like many engineers do that live in this part of the world. Attracted to this incredible, concentration of technical kinds of jobs. Was with that company for almost 25 years. Wow. Was part of a team that developed data collection systems for automobile assembly plants. Oddly enough, I'm not a car guy, but the computer systems that I helped develop and to this day are still running in, a dozen plus manufacturing plants around North America. And, really love the work, the challenge of building something new and putting it out. The team, great team of people working together. All of us were long-termers, 10, 15, 20 years, not job hopping like a lot of people do. Got to know them really well. And it was really, really great time here in Huntsville, and raised two girls that are both through college now and live in Nashville. A wonderful wife and family. I've always had great church families I'm part of. So, just really blessed to have a lot of support and not a lot of dysfunction, which is, I guess, something we'll get into a little bit about what I've learned.
Right. Well, I think, of course, we've known each other ever since I moved to Huntsville. So 28 years, I think, we've known each other. So I've been a part of that journey with you a lot, and obviously love you and appreciate you and your talents, and you've been a huge blessing in my life long before coming to His Way. But I guess I'm interested too, and so you obviously were aware of His Way because you had come out and you'd been supportive and that kind of stuff. Kind of maybe take us through this decision, because you got this very successful career, 25 years, you're locked in. I mean, you can do this the rest of your life, you're set, there's no sweat with this, and you come to this decision to abandon that, leave that, and join, our efforts. What prompted that?
Yeah, it's hard. Maybe in retrospect, I can understand a little better, but in the moment, you mentioned it's kind of no sweat, and how I like to make things efficient. I like to boil it down to repeatable process, and my job actually had very much become that. It was a lot of maintenance of what we were doing, and it still was great work. Dynetics, great company. I'm still, doing very low level work because that system is out there, and nothing but great things to say about them. But there was this time through 2014, 2015 where, I don't know, something just wasn't fulfilling about work. And of course, I think particularly as men, but certainly all people that work, looking for something that feels like you're doing something important. And I think that's what, that wasn't happening for me. And I think my wife, Misty, understood that at some level. And even though I couldn't always put it into words, And, it's funny, even in our team, as great as the guys were and loved being with them, we didn't really have to interact very much. All of us were, because the system was now mature, we all were kind of siloed. And even though we all worked up and down the same hallway, we didn't have to see each other. A lot of just email and phone call. Most of my closest relationships at that point were actually with people in Detroit. That we had a group in Detroit, and that's all feels at some point becomes very impersonal. And I think that was a part of, not feeling connected to people as much. I'm not the biggest extrovert in the world, but, I realized that I enjoy being with people. It's interesting that during COVID, that group 100% got permanently sent home to work from home because they could. Right. We were already basically working that way in offices. Right. And I would take an afternoon break, and get up and just kind of go, and hey, is everyone alive? We're here, we're next door. Even the guy I worked with most closely was right next door to me. Great guy, Bruce. His system was the most immediate, companion to my system, and our systems talked together. When we needed a new feature, we were so adept at this point of how it worked. I'd just shoot him an email. Hey, Bruce, we need to do this one little thing, and he'd respond, okay, Adam. And the next thing we know, we're going. We didn't have to collaborate and design anything. So the maintenance part of it, the nature of that work, it was never really going to be anything different. And when I was 45, 46 years old, and thinking, I think it just occurred to me, I've still got a lot of work in me. I think when you're 25, you think, oh man, 45, you're really old. Right. But you realize I've got something maybe I could do differently. Right. And so I reached out to you and Bill Nyland. Bill in particular, who was working here at the time, and just said, hey, you guys know me really well. Is there a place for me here? And I was wondering, I was thinking, what I don't know what the conversations were at that point. I know I have a sense of that, but I'm curious from your side, how did that go?
Well, I mean, yeah, we had thought a lot because we've interacted over the years, and we even relied on you with your talent and your skills, particularly technically, to help support us every day. You'd come out and do things for us and that kind of thing, and help us. You were always our go-to guy. And when we were, when you kind of reached out and said, hey, I'm kind of considering something. I mean, we're quick to say, wow, that'd be great. What can we do? And then, of course, you have to figure out, okay, so where does he fit in this? Right. Because it's not like we have a clear spot and that kind of thing. And yet, I guess I've always operated, and you've seen it operate here, that, we really want to find talented, passionate people and kind of find a place for them. Because I feel like if we get talented, passionate people, they'll help make things better, and they'll kind of fit in a role and become a part of the team. So I think, that's kind of how we saw it. And, then we started discovering and kind of identifying where are some things we can kind of.
I remember sitting right here when this area used to be your couch in your office, and Bill just saying, well, we're in a point of growth here where we're about to build a new building and considering what kind of new hires we might make. And I think what was on the immediate horizon was maybe an assistant Tom, director, pastoral type, which clearly I'm not. And, but it was really a blessing for us to be able to talk about what might be. And, then to come in and see, okay, this is still in a sense running as a small startup. From the way the office works and the way, a business, not the business part of it necessarily, but just how the processes and things run. And so I saw, okay, yeah, there's a place here where I can still be technical, because what I didn't know and had no idea about was what it meant to be a part of a recovery, center. And I knew it was going to be, that was going to be a challenge. I remember one of our mutual friends at church asked me to, have a coffee together, and he's like, how in the world do you think you can really do this? Is your temperament going to allow for this? And he was challenging me on it. And I said, well, I'm not going to be as directly involved, with the men's recovery. And I was looking at it as a chance to kind of grow, which is, maybe we'll get into that a little bit about how that's happened. But yeah, so just, I was really blessed also that Misty, during this time, she knew that I wasn't really happy with my otherwise great job. I had no reason not to be happy with it. And, we had one daughter in college and another one that was just about to graduate high school. And she never once tried to, be the wet blanket on that. And she said, I think you should pursue this. And of course, we weren't quite to a new phase yet of growth yet. Not everything that, as you said, I've grown into was really in place to get going at that point. But yeah, so then we started off.
Well, I'm thinking, I'm putting myself in your position. You have a good career, I'm sure a good income. You got a track that's going to kind of progress that way. And the reality is, I know you and I talked a little bit. Where you were, you could easily take your skill set and go somewhere else and make good money and kind of get a new career going and move in that direction. And so to derail all of that to a nonprofit addiction ministry kind of thing, what was the thought process? Why? You said kind of this significance thing, making a difference, but how do you do that?
Yeah, I think that was it. It's interesting that when I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next, I also had gone through the entire interview process with another very similar company in town that we mutual friends, 3 or 4 of them worked in that group. That was a chance kind of conversation that said, hey, if you know people looking for jobs, young engineers, we're hiring. I was like, well, how young? And they're like, oh, why do you ask? Kind of thing. And they made a great offer that would have all of those things about career and the salary would have not been an issue at all. But I think I looked into thinking ahead. I had the package in my hand, and I just wanted something different. I could foresee in that I'd be in the same scenario. It wasn't about leaving the system I was working on to do some. It was really about doing something fundamentally different with people. And I think that kind of work is absolutely fulfilling, and it just had no longer was that for me. And I don't, I would not preach or begrudge anyone to say, oh, everyone should be, in ministries or anything like that. But just for where I was, saying I'm willing to do this. It never felt like a sacrifice. And maybe it's because of the support I had. And it never felt like a big leap of faith. And again, I think had I not known you and Bill and Brenda working at thrift stores and all that, then I probably would have never thought about, go work for a recovery ministry. That would have been, I think, very unusual.
Right.
But because of that, maybe it's the opposite side of what you said earlier. If you think good people are available, you're going to find a way. But it's like, I think I can find a way to be a part of a team of good people.
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the things that obviously you came here with some expectation that you were making a change towards something else of some kind. Did you find this something else? And what was it that you found here? And maybe what's it become versus what you expect it to be?
Oh boy, I'm not quite so introspective as the way you put that. So I don't know what I expected, except that it would be different. I'll tell you what, some of the things that I've found is I was very much in a bubble with the way life was, working around a lot of the same kinds of people. Obviously, even like our management were just other engineers and programmers. Everyone, doing their own thing. There wasn't actually, like I was saying, a lot of team interaction, and that's something that's fundamentally different here. And certainly not with when your end product is a piece of software and having to troubleshoot that piece of software when it's running in a manufactured environment. I think the number one skill I probably developed over all those years was troubleshooting, just being able to hear what's going on and go find, the root cause in something quick to get it working again. And this is obviously completely different from that. You don't troubleshoot people, and the quick fix to get it up and running again is, probably rarely the best decision. So learning that there's just are just experiencing this broader world of even what work life looks like, working within very, very different kinds of thinking people, and who are like you, coming from a ministry standpoint. Or again, I was just very, very siloed in how that looked.
Well, and you mentioned, having grown up in a really great family, being very active in church, going through a, wonderful campus ministry experience, coming into a, career in which you were with. All these things, you're very much, as you mentioned, kind of in this bubble. And all of a sudden you come here and you're exposed to people who have not been, and that have probably ever even seen a bubble like yours.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're confronted with that. How have you processed just dealing with the addict and the lifestyle and all those kind of things? Because definitely could be jarring for somebody who's been in a much more isolated environment.
Yeah, there was addiction in my family, but it wasn't really directly. It was I didn't have to live with that in our household and active. It was so I've never, before I got here, I never really saw just the real consequences and the real brokenness that happens. And of course, even here, I'm not a front line working with a guy's recovery in the sense of that kind of typical counseling and one-on-one, digging deep to the problem and helping. And I really don't have those skills, quite honestly. But so there's a sense where I really get to deal with the guys, and they just feel like guys to me. I'm aware of why they're here. I certainly know that, and what I should be a part of in helping their recovery. But I'm also I'm a little I'm still one distance away from it, and so it hasn't really felt that jarring. I do think a new word that came into my vocabulary, I found myself saying over the past 5 or so years, is the word messy. Everything, there's a lot of messiness here, and in the software world, we don't like messy. This idea of people say, well, we want a feature that does maybe this or that or that. And it's like, tell me what you want. I need to know what are the parameters, right. What's the outcome we need, and that's what we're driving to. And so I think I'm much more aware of, obviously that's the way life always works. And I think that has translated for me into how I interact with people a lot more. And I can remember early on the times I did have to deal with is the wrong word, but just I was interacting with residents a little more hands-on, like if maybe we were overseeing all of us putting those volleyball floors together. Mm-hmm. And just to see the defiance about, I'm going to stand over here and not help, one resident when 30 other guys are, trying to, and I would get so frustrated, just like, no, this is, right. How can you let these other guys do the work? And there were times Daryl had to say, Stuart, just go, and because he's learned how to, how to manage that better. I think I've grown in those areas and realizing, that where a lot of that's coming from and how I can be beneficial in the way I respond versus not. I'm not a very patient person, but I think I've grown in that over this, and particularly helping with the guys' money and seeing that part in bank. If you want to talk a little bit about that, but that's also a place where I can see myself, just meeting the guys where they are versus what my expectations of them are.
I mean, right. When you came here, one of the things you've been great at, obviously, is helping us behind the scenes with a lot of our technical development stuff and our processes and those kind of things, and streamline those things, which a lot of your gifts and talents focus on, which has been a great blessing. But obviously, you have come up with ways to interact with the guys. Yeah. Maybe you can kind of highlight what are the ways you interact, and what have you learned from those particular exposures? So
the first year I was here, Jeremy and I went and were certified on the MRT program. Now, I haven't continued a lot in being a facilitator. I'm more of a third string when I need to fill in. But I did for a while. I was doing that a little bit more. And, of course, that was real out of my comfort zone, facilitating a 12-step program. And where you're hearing, the guys are having to share their backgrounds. And it was that was immediate, baptism into this is a different situation than the bubble that I was living in. But even within that, I knew that what the program was doing, not just MRT, but our program was doing was 100% an answer for that brokenness. And so I felt actually drawn to that, and not something that I needed to keep at arm's length. That it's like, okay, and learning about the difficult situations these guys have grown up in, and my heart was just breaking for them more than it was any kind of way I want to repel that. But, really the main way I've stayed in contact throughout most of the years here with the guys, particularly, is through teaching. And the longest class I've done is a communication class, communication skills. At first, it's really funny. At first, it was highlighting real practical skills of, how you interview. And, just even when I'm not doing very well now, sit up straight, lean forward and enunciate well. And there's a lot of value in that. But what it's grown into is actually a lot more about interpersonal relationships and, trying to be a good listener and, being careful about your tone and your body language, which is funny because it's a great lesson for me pretty much every time I go over some of these. I need to be careful about this. I can feel when I'm getting frustrated now and I can hear the sarcasm come out in my voice. And it's like, that's not helpful, Stuart, but connecting with the guys there, the only regret on teaching is I only teach during the first month. And so once the guys move on, I kind of lost contact with them. Of course, we added a class, which is my favorite time of the week, bar none. And that's the Friday class on identity. And it's really a class about what does God say about who we are coming out of the book of Genesis in the first few chapters. And I just love that class. I love to see the guys as they connect with the idea that they're created in the image of God. They're created for a purpose. And God has given us a calling to be a part of his good work here. And so I'm getting to know the guys a little better. And now that, in the last year or so, I've been doing bank in the morning. And now I'm seeing the guys much more regularly. And it's interesting how, even though I'm not with them as I said, with, your side of things on the front line of counseling and really formally, uncovering the issues of recovery. But in that informal time in the bank, they open up because and now become kind of this, on the fly mentor and asking questions about family. And, that's all things that I would not have had. I just wouldn't have been a part of that had I remained in kind of that corporate, world. And it's really great to see around here. We're starting a mentoring program more formally than we have in the past. And, even that's going to be tough if it's just 30 minutes a week, an hour a week. And it's a great start and we need it. But, being a part on the inside and just being around the guys is really shown me the power of, what a Christian life can look like to those who haven't experienced it.
Right. That's awesome. As you reflect back on this experience, how long have you been here now?
5.5 full-time years. And then pretty much the year before that was, part-time and volunteer.
So about 6.5 years
about
total.
6.5 years.
And, during that time, I guess, in being exposed to something that's very otherworldly from the world you had been in for so long, what do you identify as maybe some of the key growth areas for your life? Like I thought about if I could just ask your wife, okay, how has Stuart changed in 6.5 years from this experience? What would she identify as some of those core ideas?
Yeah, I think I'm more sensitive to people. Still maybe not what I would like to be, but I definitely am. Again, before my life was really about the work, and even in my church ministry, even that was about, wasn't about people per se, front and center. It's about the technology and the AV. Right. And even as a song leader, it's about the structure and, and having a service. And all those things appeal to me, as something you can map out and, you can kind of go step by step and nail. I think much, much more so, like just in the morning, just a small thing. Right now we have a group of guys who you probably notice them every morning. They're in the eating area, around the coffee and the breakfast that's left over, and just stopping by and talking with them briefly and letting, I don't know, it hits my mind it's like just letting them know that, hey, we care about them, and even though I'm not doing anything specific to prove that to them in that moment, but hey, I'm here, just taking time out to divert. And a guy's, as I'm walking across campus and a guy's sitting down on the pavilion, just, hey, and that's not in my nature necessarily. And it certainly was, I could go a whole week back in the day of me making some phone calls, some email, and really not having any kind of real, conversation with anyone that, didn't have something to do with work. And that's not healthy at the end of the day. So that would be one big area, just being more aware of people. I mean, you're really, really great at that. And I know it drives you. It's really what, and it's just not, again, in my nature. I mentioned patience. I think within that's been a different thing. I tell you one thing I alluded to earlier is not always jumping to the quick answer. It's in my nature again, and it's actually in my training to do that.
Right.
Because in my previous world, if something was broken, it had to be fixed right away. Otherwise, there might be a better fix later, but we have to immediately fix something. And so I try to be not as quick to come to a conclusion on those things, because it's not always the best thing. I spend a lot less. I'm not a meeting guy. I spend a lot less. I want to sit back more and let other people kind of work out and hear, even if I think I know, this would be a great quick fix, and being careful on that. And I think the other thing is being more expressive about to other people about being involved in ministry, even to our friends who are working full-time jobs, and just sharing this blessing of what it means. And so, I teach very regularly the church I'm at now on Sunday mornings, and I almost every week I'm using a His way. I mean, this is where church is really happening. This is where the kingdom is really happening. It's very, very obvious. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen other places, and getting to highlight that and trying to inspire other people has been much, much more part of my life, even in the last few years, than it was in the first couple of years I worked here, because it went from being, okay, this is a job, to now being a ministry, within that time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, the last thing I was going to ask about is, obviously none of us know what God has in store for us in the future, but maybe as you looked in the future here, where do you kind of see yourself going? Is there kind of I really want to, what about this? Or is there any thoughts you have in terms of where you see this going?
See, that wasn't on the list of potential questions, because of all the questions that you ever get, like on performance reviews and stuff. It's like, where do you see these? It is 100% not the way I think, and that's not necessarily great. It just is. I remember some of those early conversations here. I told you and Bill, I'm not a CEO vision kind of guy. I'm hey, we have a plan. Let's make it happen. And so I really, honestly, I want to remain a part of this team, and see things get deeper and grow. And thankfully, here's what I'm very thankful for. There are a lot of people like you and others on our board and our board committees now. And obviously our staff is a lot bigger than it was when I first came to work. And there are other people who are creating some of those visions for His way. I mean, this can be no surprise to you. I would not have been the champion to go plant His Way Atlanta. But, hey, we're doing it. Let's support it, and I feel that's where I'm most successful and where my role is best. So, yeah, just continue to be a part of this, and whatever we see as a great direction to go, then let's do our best to make that happen.
Amen. Well, I appreciate you sharing today very much. And, obviously, I appreciate you in so many ways in terms of the gifts and talents. One of the things I love about your story is that here you are with a very strong technical background, and you wouldn't typically look at a recovery ministry and say, oh yeah, here's a place where I'm going to execute my computer technology skills and all that kind of stuff in recovery ministry. And yet there's been a place to do that, but it's also been broader than that, and it's helped you grow and realize that your gifts and talents in ministry here. And I think for a lot of our viewers and listeners, to think about, you may be sitting on the sidelines looking at, well, I'd like to be involved in ministry somehow, but I'm a silo guy. I sit in my office, and yet there's a place for you too. And there's a place that you can find fulfillment in the kingdom and really move past just, a job and a career into real significance and really being a part of something that is more eternal and has a greater impact. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate you listening and viewing us today. If you'd like to learn more about His Way, you can check out our website at hiswayinc.org.